Hello, and thank you for having me, Marie Claire, and for all of you for joining us in today's session. I am going to power through what is typically a 1 hour long talk and really focus on survival, resiliency, and joy in game dev, and it's going to be fun. You have to promise me that you'll laugh at least once, otherwise I will have failed at my job. And tick, I have met that criteria. All right, it's all down here from here. So a little bit about me. I am a word nerd. I could not get into grad school and I was devastated. So I have an English degree. And at the time in 2001, I wanted to research the impact of the publishing industry that would experience because of the internet. And they said, we don't understand the internet in 2001. We don't understand how that's going to change traditional publishing. So I was pretty good at computers. And as a woman, I downplayed that. So I never really thought of myself as a techie. So I turned to a life of crime, actually a life of comedy, and also some laughter yoga in there. So I've been a stand-up comedian since 2005. I don't perform a lot, but as a keynote speaker, comedy is always on brand for me. And in the last 7 years, I have worked with my husband. So this is my beloved Blair of 24 years. And we built a game studio that's just outside of Toronto. It's a ed tech game studio. I'll share a little bit about that. And so we got started because my husband had a near-death experience in 2012. And we thought, you know what, this is the prime opportunity for us to leave. We were living in the States at the time. We're Canadian. We were living in the States at the time. He nearly died. We thought, listen, we don't have children. We don't have a mortgage. We don't have any obligations. Why don't we see if we can live the dream that we want to live? So he wanted to build a game studio and had this vision of making a simplified platform for writers to be able to make short story-based games. And I don't know, as an English nerd, that sounded really great to me. So he is the hacker. I am the hustler. I'm the one that I put in front of everybody. And so we jumped into the life of a startup. And I will tell you, startup life is very hard. In fact, as a career coach to game devs, I tell them, go and join somebody else's well-funded company. Do not try the indie dev route yourself unless you are prepared for learning through failure, which is a wonderful thing to do, but it is incredibly very hard. So as you can see, there are smiles, there are lots of money, sadness, and so there's good stuff that happens. And we've raised over $500,000 from our friends and family. The whole experience, which I tell in a 1 hour keynote, and also through my podcast, if you're interested in listening, the Twitter handle is G3RealTalk. And if you go to g3realtalk.com, you'll end up at my podcast page. And it's Gains, Grit, and Gratitude, Real Talk with Jean Leggett. And what I'm trying to do is to deconstruct the experience of being a game developer from a life coaching perspective. Because, man, are there things that I wish that I had known? So when we're talking about resiliency, to have gone through 7.5 years of doing this crazy thing together with somebody that I love. So let me tell you, payroll talk at pillow talk time is not sexy. I just want you to know that. And, when you're worrying about how you're going to pay somebody and you've got your head, like that's not romantic in the least. I also talk about being blackmailed, extorted, sabotage, infidelity, because, relationships are impacted by these things, and I'm not embarrassed about it. So I am using the podcast as a means to share my experience, to destigmatize the very real and ugly things that happen, but we've also had incredible things happen. So throughout the process, we've had massive highs. Like I've been in the boardrooms of the people who created The Walking Dead, Minecraft, Xbox. We've managed to get into conversations with big people, which is wonderful. And we're currently working with a #1 New York Times bestseller to adapt her novel into a game. That's a whole other talk, but her novel that I chose is about a rape survivor dealing with PTSD. And so there's a whole talk about how do you create sensitive subject matter in games. And for us, it's all about reiterating, rebuilding, refreshing. Like it's just a constant cycle and you can never get complacent. So we built our story stylus and we wanted to do this book meets game hybrid to figure out, is there even a market? But I'll tell you, traditional investors didn't believe in us. If it hasn't been already said to you earlier in this conference, only 3% of VC funding goes to women-led companies. Now, we made a conscious choice to put me as the charming face of the company because I'm a smooth talker, right? That's how we got the $500,000, and it works well. However, I will say that the traditional investors that we have met have been guys. I've even had men say, would you like a seat, dear? And I said, no, thank you, gentlemen. Strap in. I'll be speaking today. And I just barreled through it because that's all I can do, is to show up with confidence and, let's face it, the balls to do it. They didn't believe that women played games. They didn't believe that there was a market for narrative games. And I honestly do believe that we were 5 years too early. I've seen Dorian, which is a narrative-based platform, which I don't know enough about the platform to say where it stacks up against ours. But from what I'm seeing, ours is way cooler, but it is led by a woman, and it's led by a woman who has a lot of experience in the VC space. So she was already in that community and understood the fundraising community. We didn't have that. We were an hour outside of a major city with a lack of access to investors. We all know that women play a lot of games. They prefer story-based games. They prefer wholesome games. The average age of a woman gamer is 42. I'm average. Actually, I'm now above average, which I quite like it that way. So there's a lot of space for getting clear about the kinds of games that you want to make. This, for me, that's why I'm building the company that I'm building. We may be 7.5 years into this, but I'm not tired of it because I do believe that there's a vision for us. So along the way, we decided to do this crazy thing. And I thought, could we teach little children, which I don't have? I'm 43 and I don't have children. I just say thank you and I let them go home. Could we teach them how to use our technology? Have we made it easy enough? And yeah, was it easy? Would they love it? Could we have them do it? We taught them how to make narrative games. So we've taught children as young as 7.5 years old how to code in Lewis script. And in fact, this is a game that's playable on our website right now called Attack of the Killer Zombie Cats. And you play as Barack or Michelle Obama to defeat Trumpy Cat. It was made by an 11-year-old girl in 18 hours during our summer camp in 2016 during the US election. Now, as you can see, there are unicorn tears because that is an item of the antidote. We've actually taught Kira how to do a story design and flow. And honestly, that's been some of the funnest part of my job. When we envisioned this technology, we were very clear, point and click narrative games for people like me. And it turned into this amazing tool that we could then share with children and with educators. I'm going to breeze through the next couple of slides, but this is a game, The Adventures of Finn and Gax, about two brother puppies that do not look alike. This was done by 8-year-olds. This is all hand drawing that we scanned into their point and click game. You can see some of their locations here. This is Super Monkey and Super Kitty because the kids were not that great with naming conventions. And so the idea is that they meet a big bad wolf, and along the way, when they are generous to other characters in the game, they acquire items that allow them to go to portals. Now, we did this for Microsoft, and the little girls, I asked them at the end, which portal would you like to go into? This is the big demo with their parents, and they're like, yellow, yellow. Well, this is what happens when you go in the yellow portal. You see, little 7.5 and 8-year-old girls wanted to build jump scares. That's the other thing. You're always going to encounter things in your experience along the way that totally blow your mind. I did not expect 8-year-old girls to be really into The Walking Dead. Like, I don't even watch The Walking Dead, but they loved zombies and guts and gore, and they loved Five Nights at Freddy's. And I think that whole experience has really blown my mind as to what's possible, and let them have fun, right? Like, not to dictate what they want to do, but let them have fun. So because I'm a hustler, the first year we did the camps, I just relied on my personal network. I had 3 girls and 19 boys. The second year, I hit people up for money. So here's the thing that you'll hear me say in the podcast: clarity equals cash. Cash is goodwill, opportunities, jobs, etc. I was able to tap into my community and say, listen, I no longer have a space. Somebody gave us a space, and I thought, oh, that's technically a sponsor. Who else can I roll that out to? And I was able to ask my people at PayPal and Shopify and other major companies to donate. And we were able to have, I think it was 25 girls, 25 boys in the second year. Like I specifically focused on stacking it so that I had more children from underserved communities in this program, because I will die on my socialist beliefs. It's super important to me to make sure that we're doing the thing that drives our legacy. So we had lots of fun with games. Not all 8-year-olds are very focused. So that was like herding cats. And the big difference between doing the 8-year-olds versus the 12 to 16-year-olds is you have them like five into one group. And then with the older kids, you can actually let them do their own games. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot from focusing on that ed tech space for a short period of time. I learned that it's a lot of fun, that they gravitated towards the skills that they like. So it was like watching a little micro studio. You had your designer, your writer, your coder, your programmer. The bossy kid was the project manager. The kid that liked to break stuff, that's QA, right? And then you have all of these fun kids. And what's been the most magical of that is, listen, if I walked away from the games industry tomorrow, I know that I've changed the lives of hundreds of children. And I get emails from them still 3-4 years later saying, I learned how to code because of you and I'm still coding. And that's worth more than the success of any game or any award. But really what I want to focus on is this idea of living in joy. And one of the things that I think women most likely more often gravitate towards too is being driven by our values. Sometimes those values are gender-based, but for me, it's whose story gets to be told, what story are we telling, who deserves the spotlight, who is talking with truth and integrity and inclusivity, why is this important? And who is speaking loudly enough to be heard and understood and acknowledged. Like these are really important values to me. And that's why I built this platform. That is why when I have pivoted to use my coaching background as a career coach in game dev, when I lead my clients through like the resume workshops, it's all about what are your values? Like what's important to you? How are you showing up in the world? Because I don't think we have those conversations in game dev. Game dev is still in its infancy. We're not having these deep, meaningful conversations. And so what if we started talking about legacy? What if the women just ignored what was happening on the guys' side of the room and started building a legacy-driven industry? This whole question of do we silence those who threaten to burn down equality and justice? I think we should be amplifying those voices. All right, so we need to be asking the hard questions, making sure that we're inclusive, and making sure that our values are fully present as we are building not only technologies, but telling the stories that we are telling as women in games. For me, it's kindness, compassion, community. If you follow me on Twitter, you know that I talk about kindness and compassion almost every single day, and curiosity. So curiosity means being willing to be wrong in the room. For me, how do we build on what we have? Well, it's building accessible tools for people with disabilities, for people who have low literacy, for people in developing countries, democratizing interactive digital media, and giving back. This is, I don't know if you've been following me. I was a poor game dev for 7 years because we didn't pay ourselves much. We onboarded all of these people to work with us. Building a technology when your revenue will come when you sell the technology doesn't mean that you have money coming in early. And $500,000 over 6.5 years with a team that's between 2 and 18 people is not a lot of money. Don't think the $500,000 ever enough money. It isn't. And so we lived in poverty for 7 years. In fact, we were homeless for two months last year. And what did Jean Leggett do? She made a hashtag OMSG Nomad Adventure and went on a 2-month couch surfing tour and did 9 speaking engagements in multiple cities because nobody needs to know that I'm homeless, because that'll be the story I tell after we're not homeless anymore. And but I had a community of barn raisers. You'll hear me talk about that on the podcast. Like it's about cultivating your sense of community and being engaged. Clarity equals cash. Clarity also consistency, right? Showing up and being consistent. What people see when they see Jean Leggett is they see joy, compassion, and kindness. And they want to be part of that too. So for me, for the last couple of months, because of COVID, I have not been able to do my international speaking, and I've been doing coaching. I never thought I would be putting coaching and game dev into the same space. And I am absolutely 100% in love with it. I miss making games, but I really love being able to help people around the world. It's addictive and it's joyful. So that's what I've been doing. Because here's the thing. Without technology, humanity has no future, but we have to be so careful that we don't become mechanized, that we lose our human feelings, right? It's so important that when we are being mindful about creating games, is that we are memorializing, remembering, and celebrating and connecting and exploring people's stories. That's my biggest concern right now, is who has the money, who gets to tell these stories, across the spectrum of how you identify. No to othering people, and yes to together of people, and being very, very mindful. Like, I will die on this as my burning thing is, what is in alignment with your values? So I can't believe I gave a 1 hour talk in 16 minutes. That is insane. But if you would like to, normally I would tell like a lot of stories in there, and but you got like the whiz bang version of it. Community service is something that's been burning in my heart for my entire existence. And I love that not only that I got to think about that as we built our technology, but how I show up in my everyday now. And, COVID is a really hard time right now, right? Everybody is struggling. I have pity parties. I want to cry. When we were homeless last year, I did a lot of crying and felt sorry for myself. But here's the thing, find the right people to connect to, find your community. So it's clarity, consistency, community. Those are your big C words. And when you can find those things, you'll find the meaning. And when you live in alignment with your values, it's so much easier to find joy, and it's so much easier to power through all of the garbage. My marriage nearly fell apart in the first year of our startup. And that's going to be on episode 5. I expect that one is going to be very much downloaded. And I don't share it to be salacious. I share it because there's so much deep shame around that kind of thing. It's like, listen, we are all human. We make human mistakes. There's nothing to be ashamed of in this adventure that is all of us. It's wouldn't it be great if we could just learn to celebrate each other for all of the contributions that we have to bring? So that's it for the formal talking portion. I'm happy to answer questions.
Look, you are a serious warrior, woman. I am. It's unbelievable, your story that you've told in 15 minutes. And to be homeless and to have those ups and downs. I mean, I have some stories myself, and perhaps Jean, you and I personally can share them at some point. But because I'm not quite ready to share them publicly. But
yeah.
I think what you're saying though about, the challenges of life, and then how you confront them, how you face them, what you do, how you think about those things. Because I think when things can go wrong, and I think for a lot of people right now, as you're talking about COVID, it's a very difficult time, and it's very easy to just go down a slope rather than thinking, okay, this is a real challenge. But what do we do? How do we shift that conversation, shift that territory? So very, very fascinating to hear that story. At the moment, there's no questions. I mean, there's 45 people watching.
They all fell off their chairs.
Well, I think the speed of the 15-minute life story is just. I think they're on the floor somewhere, nowhere near their keyboard to ask you any questions. So, I suppose that one of the things that I would like to ask you is, what do you see? Obviously, it's hard for all of us, because when we look ahead, we can't quite see. There's COVID. We don't know. We don't know how this is going to resolve. What the shape of life is going to be in. But I know that you've enjoyed the traveling. You did a lot of traveling. What do you see the future as? I mean, again, you've talked a little bit about what you're doing with the coaching, which I think is amazing. But I suppose more on a bigger scale, what do you think?
As crappy as the COVID experience has been globally, I think that it's helping us, the mature thinkers, the critical thinkers, because we won't talk about the people who are refusing to do the smart things. I think that it's having people dig deep into what's important to them. It's having them reevaluate what are their life priorities. Like, I now know, for the last 7 years, how to live off of a double income of less than $30,000. I don't want to ever do that again. That's below the poverty rate here in Canada. Thank goodness we're in Canada, because we don't have to worry about like healthcare money and stuff like that. Like, we're covered. And like, we used to make really good money. I had given up $1 million in salary between the two of us to work on our startup. But I used to just take that for granted, and I don't take that for granted anymore. So I think there's a shifting of what's important to us. I think the advantage to women with COVID, so there's a disadvantage, a massive disadvantage, in that I've heard the phrase she-cession, like a recession, but affecting more women, because we are being
I've heard it
relegated back into our domestic caretaking, because that's very gendered. So we're seeing women lose that income, lose the opportunities in the workforce. And I can't imagine how tough that must be as a mother, because like I said, I don't have children. I have lots of friends who have who are moms, but I can't personally speak firsthand as to what that experience is like. But I will say, for the moms who have been able to do work and caretake at the same time, what COVID is now clearly demonstrating to the corporate world is women get it done. So I'm hoping that with companies that are now moving to more flexible work, as we hopefully envision a second wave and out of the second wave and back to normal life, is that I'm hoping that companies will be more flexible about hiring moms, which would be really great. I'm hoping that they'll be more likely to consider maybe 3 or 4 day work weeks or job shares. So the flexibility that we need for healthier living, I pray, comes out of this conversation, because I don't know about you. I think that a 5-day work week is overrated. I do 3 intensive days, and then I leave a day and a half for work. Those 3 intensive days are like client work versus like my company's work. And I'm trying to balance those things a lot better. So that's what I'm really hoping. I am deeply concerned about how COVID will have set people back economically. I mean, we were just finally getting over being homeless. I was like, in all of last year, not only were we homeless, but my dad had stage 4 cancer and passed. And so I was homeless, and I could not afford a flight home to see him before he died. And so I went on Twitter to connect with my community that I had shown up consistently with, and with clarity. And I said, listen, I need money. I can't say why. Here's the link to my PayPal. You know me as a game dev, but I am a coach. So if you need coaching in these areas. And the next morning I woke up to $1,500 in my bank account. It was enough to pay for a flight. It was because people consistently saw me do the work, right? No one likes somebody who just does this all the time. It's like, it's got to be followed with action. And also, one of the reasons why I give back so much to the community is people gave back to me. When I needed it, they were there for us.
Yeah. Absolutely, Jean, and I think that's a very, very important thing. That idea of that reciprocal arrangement of what you can give, and it isn't always about money. But obviously, in the case that you're talking about, it was that money that enabled you to do something. But it's much more about the relationships you build, I think, and the trust that you have with people, which is so important. Interestingly enough, I've got Constance here who's saying, checking bank balance and wondering how long the coaching waiting list is. So
drop me a line, Constance. We can talk.
That's just come in, and so many lovely comments to you. And Emily is saying, love your story, such an inspiration. Do you still do workshops and coaching for children? I certainly have a school and children that would be interested in this. And And, I mean, this is a great feed. Lots of people here, 45 people here really supporting what you're saying, Jean. So, we have come across each other. I know we've never met each other until now, but we haven't actually met in person. But this feels like the most person we're going to get right now, and it's absolutely amazing to meet you. I'm just time checking now because
we have like 3 whole minutes.
1956, and we have the funny women coming.
Yes.
As a comedian yourself, I'm hoping that you're gonna join that. And I also would just like, in the last few minutes, for just some final words, Jean, to the audience. That would be really great. Just anything, sum up anything, say anything you want, and I know you can.
One of the things that I learned about myself is that I am more of a leader than I ever knew, that I had more grace and resilience than I ever knew. And in the work that I do with friends or with clients or with just people in game dev in general as mentees is, listen, each and every one of us has more grace and resilience and leadership than we know. It's just we have been taught to downplay that. And, the podcast is feeding into a book that I'm writing, and my favorite thing is some jerk telling me 6 years ago, well, there's no point in your coming in to pitch our angel investment group because I doubt you'll be solvent by August. Dude, it's been 6 months. It's been 6 years. I not only have survived 6 years, I have built the thing I said we were going to build. I have delivered it, and I have exceeded my own expectations. And I bet most of the people he invested in don't even exist anymore. So ladies and everybody who's listening, listen, we are much more powerful than we ever give ourselves credit for. So I want you to own that amazingness in you. If you're struggling, reach out to I call them barn raisers. There are people who are going to show up and build that barn with you.
Yeah, nice.
And if you need a little bit more magic of Jean, like honestly, I'm not monetizing the podcast. The podcast is it's like the Jean show, but it's the Jean show in a fun and engaging way. And there are some really great nuggets in there. Come and hear the story and be inspired, because I want you to inspire other people. Your showing up every day is an inspiration.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for telling my story. And I'm sure there's lots of people who've been listening who are going to get in touch with you and be following and listening to your podcast. I certainly will be. Let's be in touch again soon. And thank you very much.